The world remembers her as one of the most beautiful women alive, a symbol of confidence, seduction, and success. But Stephanie Seymour didn't always see herself that way. And maybe, that's what made her story more complex than it seemed. People just see the surface, the covers, the perfection, and they rarely go any further than that. To most of the world, she was a face, a figure, a fantasy. But behind those images was a person quietly trying to understand who she really was. She was everywhere, in every magazine, on every billboard, in every glossy catalog that landed in mailboxes across the world. And yet, almost no one really knew what it felt like to be her, the pressure to stay perfect, the constant expectation, the silent grief that shaped her life behind the scenes, and the loneliness that often followed it all. "You know, I feel great, I feel confident," she once said softly, "but when I look in the mirror, my reflection doesn't always match how I feel inside." This isn't a story about fame. It's a story about what fame costs and how one woman paid in full. Long before the world knew her name, Stephanie Seymour lived a quiet, sunlit life in San Diego. Her days were simple: long summers, ocean air, and a restless sense of curiosity that hadn't yet found a home. She wasn't chasing cameras, and she certainly wasn't thinking about fame. What she did have was height, long, awkward limbs, and that unique kind of beauty that still felt unfinished. Her cousin William would later describe her as all legs and discomfort, a girl growing too fast, too tall, before she was ready for it. She just had a lot of growing pains, he remembered. Her legs hurt. She was just tall, tall, tall. Like so many future supermodels, Stephanie didn't grow up seeing herself that way. She wasn't the kind of girl who looked in the mirror and saw a supermodel staring back. She was shy, unsure of herself, and, like so many teenagers, she didn't yet understand what made her unique. "I didn't think I was anything so special," she once said. "I just had dreams." But someone else saw it early, and clearly. Her mother. A woman who loved photography, who had an eye for light, emotion, and expression, and who instinctively believed there was something rare about her daughter. She recognized not just beauty, but presence, a quiet kind of magnetism in front of the lens. And most importantly, she believed in her. It was her mother who encouraged her to submit photos to a modeling competition, Elite's Look of the Year. Stephanie was just 14. Thousands of girls applied. Only 70 were chosen. Among them were names that would soon define the next decade of fashion: Cindy Crawford, Hunter Reno, and Stephanie Seymour. She didn't win the contest. Neither did Cindy. But that didn't matter, because the point wasn't winning. The point was the door. And for Stephanie, that door had quietly, irreversibly opened. "My name is Stephanie Seymour," she said in a trembling teenage voice, "and I come from San Diego, California." From that moment on, everything began to move. By 17, she was signed to Elite. By 18, she was already living in New York, a city that could make you or break you, and she was in a relationship with John Casablancas, the head of the agency itself. To the outside world, it would one day look like exploitation. But to Stephanie, at that time, it felt like progress, the next step forward in a world she didn't yet know how to question. "When you're so young like that," she would later say, "you don't even think about it. You just go and you do it. You're not afraid of anything." What's striking about this part of her story isn't just how quickly she entered the fashion system, it's how quietly it happened. There was no pause. No moment to stop and breathe. No one asking if she was ready. Only momentum and expectation. The world assumed she could handle it. But no one had taught her how to protect herself. And the world she was stepping into wasn't designed to ask what she needed or how she felt. It only wanted to know one thing: what she could give. And she gave, because that's what young girls are taught to do, especially when they're beautiful. By the early 1990s, Stephanie Seymour had become something else entirely. No longer just a promising teenager from California, she was now a fixture in the fantasy world of high fashion. She moved between luxury houses like Chanel and Versace with the same grace she brought to a camera lens. Her name became synonymous with beauty, elegance, and a certain kind of sensuality that felt effortless but was, in truth, carefully crafted and deeply human. Yet Stephanie's success wasn't just about beauty. It was about how she used it, the way she moved, the way she held herself, the way she used her face like a language only she understood. She didn't just stand there for the camera. She told it something. She had this innate ability, one photographer recalled. Wherever you put her, it wasn't just about looking beautiful, it was about movement. You could keep shooting, and you'd never get the same picture twice. And most of all, there were the eyes. That's what photographers remembered most, not the angles, not the body, but those eyes. "I think she's an actress," one of them said. "She closes her eyes, then opens them slowly, and when she looks at the camera, she's not looking into it, she's looking through it, beyond it." That's what made Stephanie unforgettable. She didn't need to be loud to be powerful. She could hold a gaze and hold a room with a single glance. She understood that modeling wasn't just about beauty. It was about transformation. And no one captured that transformation better than Richard Avedon. With Avedon, it was never about just looking beautiful. He gave her stories to live, a role, a character, a soundtrack. And Stephanie, instinctively, understood. He was a great director, she remembered. He always had a backstory for who you were in the picture. He'd bring in music, even choreographers, he set the stage. In his studio, she wasn't just a model. She was a woman with a story, even if that story wasn't always her own. In the public eye, she was effortless. But behind the lens, Stephanie was constantly working, reinventing herself with every shoot, every season, every expression. And yet, when asked about her runway walk, the one that had stunned editors and designers, the walk that millions would one day try to imitate, she downplayed it, almost shyly brushing it aside. "I just have my sexy, own little kind of walk," she said with a laugh. "I don't try to do anything fancy, because I'm not a graceful runway girl. I could trip easy." But that was exactly what people loved about her. She didn't try too hard, she didn't have to. Her movements weren't about perfection, they were about presence. There was an authenticity to her that audiences could feel, even if they couldn't describe it. Stephanie didn't just model lingerie, she redefined what it meant to sell it. Her work with Victoria's Secret came at a time when the brand was still searching for its voice, its identity. And Stephanie helped shape that voice. The catalog wasn't just about fantasy anymore, it became something more intimate, almost personal. She made it feel like she was speaking directly to the woman flipping through the pages, or to the man quietly borrowing the magazine from her stack. From the first moment she appeared on those glossy pages, something shifted. "The catalog was never the same again," an executive once said. For millions of people, Stephanie Seymour wasn't just another model. She was the model, the first face they remembered, the first poster taped to a bedroom wall, the first person to make beauty look both unreachable and somehow real. She had become a household name, not because she demanded it, but because something about her image, her presence, stayed with people. Yes, she was glamorous. Yes, she was iconic. But she was also warm, familiar, and surprisingly funny. And in an industry built on impossible perfection, that combination made her unforgettable. But as the cameras kept flashing, and her fame grew larger, there were things she wasn't saying, things she didn't have the space, or maybe the safety, to express. "I don't want my career to just end one day," she once admitted. "I want it to mature with me, to grow with me, to become something meaningful, to be a spokesperson for something I believe in." She was building a legacy, even if she didn't yet realize it. But she was also beginning to understand something quietly devastating: that fame, especially for women in fashion, comes with an expiration date no one talks about. Even during her peak years, that thought was already there, quietly waiting in the background, whispering that time would eventually move on. There's something the fashion world rarely discusses. What happens when a woman who's built her identity around being seen decides to step away not because she failed, but because something more important called her home? At the height of her career, when her image was still plastered across billboards and catalogs, Stephanie Seymour did something few could imagine. She stepped back. Not out of scandal. Not out of exhaustion. But out of choice. She became a mother. And suddenly, her world wasn't about castings or collections anymore. It became about quiet mornings, routine, and being present. She didn't leave fashion completely, she just changed her relationship with it. She began saying no to shoots, skipping shows, refusing the endless travel. The rhythm of her life slowed, and for the first time, it was hers. "I just wanted to have a baby, so I had one," she said simply. "Then I wanted to have another, so I had another." For a while, she balanced both worlds, modeling when she wanted to, disappearing when she didn't. It wasn't about staying relevant anymore. It was about protecting what mattered. "I have to choose carefully what I do, and how much I travel, because I have 2 children." From the outside, it looked like she had found peace, a woman who had survived the industry and emerged whole. But peace has a way of being temporary. And in 2021, her world shattered. Her son, Harry, the boy who had once walked red carpets beside her, who shared her elegance, her humor, her quiet defiance, died from an accidental overdose. He was just 24. The loss was unimaginable. It wasn't just her son she lost, it was the light of her world. The news made brief headlines. But what followed wasn't public drama or statement. It was silence. A silence so deep, it became its own kind of language. Friends said she withdrew completely. For months, maybe years, she grieved privately, not in the pages of magazines, but in the quiet corners of her life, where no camera could follow. The world had once known Stephanie Seymour for her beauty, for her poise, for how perfectly she could hold herself under the lights. But what defined her after that moment wasn't how she looked. It was how she carried the weight no one else could see. More than a decade after she had stepped away from the spotlight, Stephanie Seymour did something no one expected. She returned. In 2023, she walked the runway again, not for publicity, not for attention, but for meaning. It was for allure, a designer who had once believed in her before anyone else. He had been a mentor, a friend, a creative soulmate. And walking in that show was her way of saying thank you. She didn't walk like someone trying to prove she could still do it. She walked like someone who knew what she had already done and who she had become. At 55, she wasn't pretending to be the woman she was at 25. She looked different. She was different. But that's what made it so powerful. The fashion press called it a moment. Not because it was nostalgic, but because it was real. Stephanie Seymour once said, "If I think that Harry would love something, I do it. And it helps." That was how she explained her quiet return, not to reclaim fame, not to chase